So it's really sad the way racism and plays a role in science, and how the powers that be utilize science to justify their way of keeping black people oppressed. So this brings me to talk about schizophrenia. And this is something that I really just learned while researching for this video. So a lot of this information regarding schizophrenia and black men is very much new to me. So let me read you some of the stats that I got from that. So it states that black and African American people, men more specifically, are more often diagnosed with schizophrenia and less often diagnosed with mood disorders compared to white people with the same symptoms. Black men have been misdiagnosed and overdiagnosed with schizophrenia as their emotions are read as being psychotic. So schizophrenia, according to the American Psychiatric Association, so this is the current definition of schizophrenia, is defined as a chronic brain disorder that affects less than 1% of the U.S. population. When schizophrenia is active, symptoms can include delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, trouble with thinking, and a lack of motivation. So like I stated, that definition is the current definition. We're definitely going to get more into what it used to be considered. But when you think of schizophrenia, you also think of paranoia, which can be a symptom of schizophrenia as well, right? So here's the thing about having a white clinician. They could mistake your paranoia for psychological paranoia, which is common in schizophrenia patients, but a lot of times black people and black men specifically are experiencing what is called cultural paranoia, which is relevant to this because it's defined as in layman's terms as the mistrust of white doctors. As we know, black men do not like to, generally speaking, I don't want to make this an absolute, but generally speaking, black men don't like to go to the doctor. Your wives, your girlfriend have to either set your appointment, tell you over and over again, hey, you need to check your health, you need to check this, do this, get a checkup, go to the dentist, do this, do that. They don't like to go. They don't like to go. And a lot of it, some of it is due to just their own plain out laziness and stuff like that. But a lot of it is due to their mistrust for physicians. Because as we know, throughout history, these people have used us as guinea pigs. There's a lot of things that happened to black people and black men that definitely was unfavorable to us regarding the medical field. I actually have a book that I need to read. I still have not read it yet, but let me find my book. Hold on, y'all. Ooh. All right, y'all. So I had bought this book a while ago. It's called Medical Apartheid. It's called The Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present. So a lot of the paranoia that we have as black people, it is not just in history. A lot of this stuff is very relevant. Now, I still have to read this book. I got it because I wanted to read it and learn more stuff. And I think once I finish reading it, it's kind of a big book. And I'm reading another book right now. So whenever I get to this, I'm definitely going to talk about it. But yeah. So this will tell you a lie. So the paranoia that they have is justified. It's justified. So a lot of times throughout history, black people were accused of being insane. And like I said, a lot of this is very relevant to black men They were accused of being insane when in reality, they were just acting out due to the racial climate. Like, can you imagine somebody putting a burning cross in front of your house and knocking in your doors and doing all kind of crazy foolishness, seeing lynches and all kind of stuff like that? Like, how are you supposed to react? You're going to be angry. There's no way you're going to be happy. Like, oh, look at that. Look at him hanging from that tree. Like, you're not going to be happy. You're going to be angry. You're going to be upset. But the rage that the black people had, they looked at it as insanity. So, I'm going to butcher her name. But Dr. Arundhati Nagendra. You know I'm going to put the name somewhere down here because I know I just messed that all up. She researches racism and psychosis at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. She believes that assessment bias during the diagnostic process and black people experiencing more environmental risk factors for the development of schizophrenia are instrumental regarding racial disparities in the schizophrenia diagnosis. So basically, she's saying partially due to the environment and climate that black people tend to have to live in, sometimes it can develop schizophrenia, but also that if a white person is doing the assessment, there's already a bias to it because once again they don't understand our culture, so they're very much incompetent culturally to truly diagnose us, especially depending on the issues that we have. And there is a such thing as cultural paranoia, so which is going to lead someone who is black to probably not properly display or convey what it is that they're actually feeling and going through because they do not trust who it is they're talking to, right? So black men were criminalized, and basically the criminalization of individuals with schizophrenia, they were criminalized. They were labeled with schizophrenia. They were diagnosed and labeled with schizophrenia and criminalized because it was assumed that they would be violent and a threat to society. So this was most prevalent during the 1960s and the Black Power movement. Schizophrenia was believed to be marked by anger, hostility, and projection. And what I didn't know, that I found out, is that Malcolm X was actually diagnosed with pre-psychotic paranoid schizophrenia, and he was by the FBI, right? So, and they diagnosed him or labeled him that because he was paranoid of the government, which he had every right to be paranoid of the government. Paranoia doesn't automatically make you schizophrenia. Those two things are not synonymous, you know. You're going to be paranoid if someone's out there trying to kill you, like they did, you know. So, and it also was a way for the FBI to create fear and worry amongst the citizens about him, and not just him, but other civil rights leaders as well. Black men were sent to psychotic hospitals for participating in the civil rights and Black Power movement back then. Hospitals such as Ionia State Hospital for the criminally insane was infamous for this. Jonathan Metzl, that's how you pronounce his name, he's the author of the protest psychosis, how schizophrenia became a black disease. So he stated that prior to the 1960s, schizophrenia was viewed as an illness that afflicted nonviolent white petty criminals, including some of the hospital's women who lived in rural Michigan. So this hospital was based in Michigan, right? So the book is an analysis of how within the socio-political context of the 1960s and the 1970s, the intersection of race and mental health altered the way schizophrenia was diagnosed, understood, and treated in the United States. So prior to the 1960s, schizophrenia was the symptoms were nonviolent, and it affected mostly white women, right? Now, fast forward, you have the Black Power movement, and you have Black people standing up for themselves. They're not taking no more of what the man is trying to stick to them. You know, they're what people would call acting out, acting crazy, and they had every right to. But instead of the powers that be recognizing that they're just acting out in retaliation to how they're being treated, they labeled them schizophrenia, and guess what? Sent them to hospitals, but jails pretty much, for crimes that they did. So if they were violent, if they fought back or did anything like that, they will label them schizophrenia. So by the mid to late 1960s, schizophrenia was a diagnosis that was disproportionately applied to the hospital's Ionia growing population of African American men from urban Detroit. Many of the men were sent to Ionia after convictions for crimes that range from armed robbery to participation in civil rights protests to property destruction during periods of civil unrest, such as the Detroit riots of 1968. Many of the charts would stress and would talk about how hallucinations and delusions rendered these men as threats not only to other patients, but also to clinicians, ward attendants, and to society itself. So what these doctors did in that hospital / jail / prison in Detroit was they continued to find ways to keep them there. So these men might get sentenced for 2 years, 2 years for loitering or something like that. And they get sent to the psychiatric hospital prison. And these doctors would continue to write in their charts, oh, he's hallucinating. Oh, he has a lot of anger. He needs to stay longer. So these men will go in there and be sentenced by the judge for 2 to 5 years. But then this doctor turns around and writes in their chart that they need to stay longer. And a lot of times for a lot of those men, it end up being life sentences. So it's really sad the way racism and plays a role in science, and how the powers that be utilize science to justify their way of keeping Black people oppressed. So, of course, they were mostly misdiagnosed. A lot of them probably were just depressed. A lot of them was just simply angry. Like, probably had no true mental illness, but they were just simply angry. And if they had schizophrenia, they kind of developed it, because imagine, it's no way I can imagine being sentenced to a year and now I'm in there for life. I'm gonna go crazy. There's just no way. So, you know, the situation is very sad and it's very unfortunate. That's why I do think we have to be very mindful when we talk about our elders and people who grew up during those times, because a lot of times I see on social media, especially by a younger generation, they like to say, oh, my grandma, she never got healed, she needs to heal. And it's so easy to say, oh, well, the resources are here now, but as I just explained to you all, the resources aren't that easy to come by. So imagine going through all of that back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, hell, even now today, but going through that type of life, and a lot of times those generational curses do continue on. It's not to justify it, it's not to say it's right, but we do need to have a lot more compassion for those that came before us, that really lived through that time, because it's really sad. They really went through a lot, and they could not seek therapy. And even now, a lot of them aren't living in favorable conditions to seek therapy still. Healing takes time, and some people never get the opportunity Even when it comes to, you know, black men, a lot of this that we see now within black men is post-traumatic stress disorder, because a lot of that anger that the fathers and the grandfathers, the great-grandfathers experienced gets passed on. It just changes. It's still anger, but it changes its form. You know, because of course we're not living exactly in those times, but these times ain't no better. I know a lot of us are experiencing anxiety due to the climate. I mean, black men and women are getting shot down. Unarmed black men and women are getting shot by the police every time we turn around. A lot of times, I know I can't ignore it, but sometimes I just gotta tune out, because it's a lot. I'm raising a son, and right now he might be looked at as a cute little boy, but in about 10 years, he ain't gonna be no cute little boy to them no more. You know, he's gonna be a grown man, considered a grown man. And I think about that, you know, and it's kind of it's like, what do you do? So the best thing that we could do a lot of times is just be honest. We don't have to be overly vulgar when we're telling them things. We don't have to show the children everything. Once again, I cannot tell you what to do with your child, but I don't feel the need to show my son someone getting shot down in order for him to understand that, hey, this is the reality we live in. We need to be honest, but, you know, be a little tactful with it, and make sure that we love on them. Make sure that we're just keeping them knowledge. Make sure we're providing them knowledge. Make sure they have knowledge of self, like really knowing yourself, understanding what has happened to our ancestors, what did our elders go through, and doing our best to create human beings that are compassionate, understanding, because that can go a long way with our mental health as well. A lot of us people out here really just don't be caring about nothing. They don't care about nothing. And I get it. And some of it can be due to mental illness, and then some of it is just the personality. Some of y'all just got bad personalities, but I didn't mean to get all into that. But we really, as a people, need to really we gotta figure out a solution. And